Hello, my name is Christoph Malchuk, and this is a summary video of how I produced this AK-47 3D model for 3D Game Assets module in college. So in this video I'm going to cover how I modeled the gun, the lofting and NURBS techniques that I used, the texturing, the LOD generation, and how I moved this model from Maya over to Unity. So for starters, the modeling. The gun itself is made out of 11 different parts. A stock, a handle, a main body, the trigger, magazine, wooden part, the top of the barrel, the sight, the strap. Each item that's made here is either made from a cube or a cylinder. And the way I have done it was, I've created a base cube, I extruded it to a certain length, and then I have used mesh tools and then insert edge loop, and I was creating these edge loops and shrinking them to size whenever needed. And then with the barrels, this is for example a combination of two cylinders side by side, and I linked them together. Then I've smoothed out the edge, and the way I've smoothed out edges is pretty simple. I just select the edge itself, then I do Control F and I click bevel, and this produces this thing. So I can smooth out a certain edge whenever I need. I can add more segments to give it more resolution. This has been used, for example, here, where this smooth edge comes up. It's also been used in the magazine. Like there's these lines that you can see that go down. It's better seen actually in the image itself. There's like these kind of indents in the magazine, so I wanted to recreate them. So what I have done was, I've created loop cuts going lengthwise, and then I have shrunk them in the way and then beveled them just to make it smoother. Also the handle, it's also beveled. It's with a small enough resolution, but I think this works fine. And also there. And the area here as well is also beveled. The second thing I want to cover is lofting and NURBS. I have produced this strap using NURBS and lofting because that was the most convenient way to really do it. So the way I started was I created a curve using this tool. This lets you just click and create new points, which you can then stretch to shape and create stroke. Then to produce a loft, all I had to do was just duplicate the curve, put it to the side of it, and then once it was moved to the side, I can produce like a mesh between them. Well, it wasn't exactly a mesh at the start, but you can convert the loft directly into a mesh. So the next thing I want to cover is texturing. For the texture, I have used one singular texture, which is the one you can see here on the right. This basically is a simple texture I made in GIMP. I have used this part of the AK. For this top part, it's just pretty much a crop. And the reason why I've done that is so I can just stick it on to the side of the AK here. This is what you see here is just this part. So if I click it, there's the UVs that are nicely laid out for this. This actually saved me a lot of modeling, so I didn't have to make all these details. Then for any other piece of metal that's exposed that doesn't have these details, I just use this little area here. The way I've produced this blank area was I just got this blank part here, I copied it here, and I just smoothed it out lengthwise. I used the clone tool in GIMP to just reproduce that. Once that was done, I can just stick on any blank piece of metal here. Like this, as you can see, everything just goes here. This one, but there's a bit of here on wood, but I didn't really care because it's not even visible, so it doesn't make a difference. Any metal that you see is exposed goes here. Then for the wood, I made sure to like align the grains going lengthwise so it looks better. Like this AK, you can see the grains going this way. Same for the handle. Then there's the white lines, you can see them here. This white line that you see, if I go into edge mode, that goes like along this edge. You can see that it's slightly whiter than the rest. That indicates that it's cut there. This splits the UVs at a certain point. You can see that these are mapped. So these loops are on the bottom here along one edge, and on the very top you can't really see it, but I have made a cut there as well. Then I just laid everything out nicely. Some textures overlap, but that's fine because they're pretty much just reusing the same texture at that point. Doesn't make much of a difference. Plus the things that overlap are generally hidden from view regardless. Even if I were to swap out the texture for something else, it would still work just fine because they're hidden and the player wouldn't even notice. And also another note is that the details here are the same on the left side and the right side of the AK, but the players wouldn't really see this in game regardless, so it doesn't make a difference. The next thing I want to cover is the LOD groups. The way I have done it was I had to group all of these things into one singular group first so they could all work together. The way I've done that is I selected all these pieces, and then all you have to do is press Ctrl G, and that creates a group. Now I create a subgroup within the LOD, but I'm just going to undo that. The reason why I did that is so the LODs generate all together in one go. Then once the group is created, that was this kind of mesh that does it. Then what I can do is go into edit and then LOD. I could do create LOD group. I've already done that before, and that's what this generates. You wouldn't actually have these ones, but they get created with the next step. So the next step is generate LOD meshes. You can directly click this option, but this will just produce default values. What I've done here was I went into here, and then the number of LODs I think was a 3 by default, but this one was unchecked, so I just checked it. And then this produced these default percentages. That's how much it decimates the mesh basically. So how much detail does it like knock down. The default values for these were actually okay for my purposes, so I just kept them. Then you click apply and then generate, and what that does, it just runs through like some calculations. You'll see like a little bar here that loads, and it only takes a few seconds, but it creates like different meshes, different LODs. And then once it does it, you'll notice that they're grayed out, but once you start zooming out, this one turns on and this one turns off, and it just keeps cycling depending on how far you are. The next thing I want to cover is how to move this model from Maya to Unity with all the levels of detail. The way I've done this was I selected this, then you go to File, Export Selection. This brings up this menu. I've got this exported here in the scenes folder. That's the default location, so I just went with it. And you have to select FBX export. By default it's probably going to be Maya binary, but if you go down a bit you'll see FBX export. You have to give it a name as well. I just called it AK47 LOD, and then you just click export selection and it'll save it to an FBX file. I'm now in Unity and I already have the model loaded in, but the way I've done it was I just navigated to the folder where the FBX file was located and I just dragged it in here. I have it in my assets and then models subfolder, but that's just for organization. It will work anywhere in the project. Then I have the textures folder. You have to drag and drop the texture in as well, otherwise this won't display the materials properly inside of Unity. It just needs to have a reference to the texture somewhere in the files. Another thing I've done in the materials is once I have extracted them, they will just appear in the same folder as that. I moved them into the materials folder so I can just configure them a bit more. Like for example the strap, the problem with the strap was that it only had one side rendering, but obviously I need to render it from both sides. So I changed the render faces to both, not just front or back, because that's the default behavior to save memory and space and performance basically. But the strap itself, it kind of benefits from having the rendering from both sides. The next thing I had to set up was setting up the LOD groups. So the way you can set that up easily is by going to add component, LOD group, and once you click LOD group it'll give you this kind of thing. So you can kind of adjust the camera here and have a look at the different like distances when stuff changes. As you can see, the little meshes you change. And in order to load the different meshes, once you like drag and drop the thing into the scene, if you like look at the hierarchy, there's the different LOD groups that are here. So you can simply just go like that, drop it in, and that's it. It just throws them all in, and this is now the current LOD group. It just sets them, and I've just dragged the different ones to the corresponding ones like that, and that's all you need. I've also set the fade mode to none. The reason for that is because I want it to be drastic to kind of show the change in the LODs for the purposes of the assignment. But for an actual thing I would probably use like crossfade. Crossfade is just something that kind of smooths it out a bit. so you don't really see it as much. But yeah, for this I did that. I also threw in a couple of scripts just to make it look nicer. Like for example, I got the AK to spin a bit. I got these things to fade away over distance, so the further away you are, you don't actually see these indicators. Also, these indicators kind of show you at which points the different LODs trigger. So at this point you'll trigger from LOD 0 to LOD 1, and then this one from LOD 1 to LOD 2, etc.